We were at my son's wedding when my grandson, eyes wide, whispered, "Grandma, look under the table." That moment changed everything. But let me go back a little so you can understand how we got there. I was sitting quietly at table number 8 beside my 7-year-old grandson, Lucas, at my son Daniel's second wedding. The reception hall was sumptuous, bathed in the golden glow of candlelight, with white rose arrangements on every table. A band played softly, guests chatted, and wine glasses chimed in endless toasts. It should have been a perfect day. Then the boy gripped my hand, far too tightly for someone so small. His fingers were cold. He leaned in and whispered urgently in my ear, "Grandma, I want to leave now." My heart raced. I bent toward him, worried. "What is it, honey? What's wrong?" Lucas looked at me with those wide eyes filled with a fear no child should carry. Trembling, he murmured, barely audible, "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" Those words stabbed through me like ice. A terrible premonition took hold. Slowly, I lowered my gaze, lifted the edge of the white tablecloth, and looked into the darkness beneath. And then I saw it. There, on the floor beside Lucas's chair, lay a sheet of paper folded in quarters, so small, so seemingly insignificant, but its mere presence sent the blood in my veins to frost. I took my grandson's hand, tiny, trembling, frightened, and we stood in silence as my whole world collapsed around me. I was in the middle of that candlelit reception hall, seated beside my little grandson, whom I loved more than life itself. Today was Daniel's wedding to Elena, his second wife. Lucas was completely absorbed, rolling his red toy car back and forth across the perfectly white tablecloth. His clear eyes seemed lost in a world of his own where the adult's noise did not exist. I looked at him and my heart filled with tenderness. Gently, I straightened the small bow tie on his collar, a gesture as soft as stroking the memory of his mother, Emily, whose sweet smile I still carry inside me as if it were yesterday. Soft music floated through the room, mixing with the hum of conversation and the clinking of wine toasts. The hall was lavishly decorated with pure white roses at every table. Candlelight gleamed on polished silver. I looked up for Daniel. He was moving from table to table, thanking guests with a radiant smile that tried to hide the emptiness I knew still lived in his heart. Since Emily was gone, he had been a different person. Across the room, Elena, my son's new bride, posed in her dazzling gown, stones glittering, snapping photos with friends. Her smile was flawless, cloudless, as if the world belonged to her. A strange tightness pressed in my chest, but I told myself I was being too sensitive. Servers moved deftly between tables, pouring more wine, clearing plates, adjusting napkins. An elderly couple at our table turned to me with friendly smiles. "Lucas is growing so fast. How old is he now, Hannah?" I smiled softly. "He just turned 7. Time flies." I turned to cut a piece of cake for Lucas. He looked up, gratitude shining in his eyes, then immediately lowered his head and kept pushing his little car, as if that toy were the only place he felt safe. Suddenly, Lucas froze. His small hands stopped pushing the car, and his round eyes fixed on me with a seriousness that wasn't like him. I startled a bit. A bad feeling spread through me. He grabbed my hand hard. His fingers were icy. In an urgent whisper, he said, "Grandma, I want to go now." His voice shook, as if holding back a fear he couldn't explain. My heart pounded. I put a hand on his shoulder. "What is it, my love? Tell me what's wrong." Lucas shivered, pressed his lips together, and whispered so low I had to put my ear to his mouth to understand. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" His words pierced my chest like a cold blade. A terrible fear swelled inside me, making it hard to breathe. I stroked his hair, trying to sound calm, though my heart thrashed in my chest. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let Grandma take a look," I said, keeping my voice steady for him. Carefully, I lifted the edge of the white cloth and looked into the dark space under the table, where the wooden chair legs and Lucas's little feet dangled. And there it was, a folded paper, quartered, right beside Lucas's chair. So small it nearly disappeared in the shadows, yet its presence turned my blood to ice. Lucas curled against me. His tiny hand clutched my arm for protection. I felt his quick breaths. Every tremor in him told me something was very, very wrong. I crouched and picked up the paper with a trembling hand. People around us kept laughing and toasting. But in that instant, my world shrank to me. Lucas and that damned paper. I unfolded it. The faint candlelight was enough to read the scribbled words. Table 8. Add kids' shrimp portion. Just a few words, like a fist to the gut. The blood in my veins froze, and air locked in my chest. Lucas is allergic to shrimp. Everyone in our family knows it. A single bite could endanger his life. Who would write this? Who could be so cruel on my son's wedding day? I squeezed Lucas's hand, his little fingers shaking in mine, then stood abruptly, ignoring surprised looks. The elderly couple stopped talking and watched with concern. I pulled Lucas into a tight hug, afraid that if I let go, he might vanish. The laughter and music went on, but for me, everything sank into a heavy, suffocating silence. Memories flooded me, dragging me out of that glittering hall back to the years when our family was still whole. I remember Emily, my first daughter-in-law, the way I remember morning light through a window. Her smile was gentle and warm. She made me feel held, like a true daughter would. Emily never raised her voice. She never gave me cause to worry. Peace seemed to radiate from her eyes. I still remember windy afternoons in the suburbs of Portland when I'd arrive at Daniel and Emily's small house. Lucas, just learning to walk, would laugh in the yard, chasing a rubber ball. Emily would sit on the porch with a basket of freshly cut vegetables, smiling as she watched her son. "Mom, Hannah, try the potato salad I made. Tell me what you think," she'd say, proud, setting a warm dish in front of me. I'd eat there with her, chatting about simple things while Lucas crawled across the floor with an old toy car. The most beautiful and the most painful memory is the night Lucas got very sick. He burned with fever, his tiny body hot, his eyes barely open, too weak to cry. Emily held him as tears slid quietly down her cheeks. "Mom, Hannah, I'm so scared," she whispered. I sat beside her, changing cool cloths on his forehead, trying to calm her. "Don't worry, my dear. He's strong. He'll be okay." Inside, though, a stone of worry weighed on me. I stayed up with Emily until dawn, when the first light broke and Lucas's fever finally fell. He slept in his mother's arms. Emily turned to me, eyes red, and managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what I would have done without you." I squeezed her hand, as if to say I would always be there for her and Lucas. I thought that little family would be happy forever, like a song with no end. But one fatal afternoon, everything shattered. The phone rang while I washed dishes. A police officer's cold voice was on the other end. "Mrs. Hannah, we regret to inform you there's been an accident." I don't remember how I heard the rest. My hands shook so hard I dropped a plate. It smashed to pieces. Emily died instantly when a runaway truck hit her car on the highway outside town. I stood there, paralyzed, watching the world break apart. Emily's funeral fell on a day of heavy rain, drops beating down as if the sky itself wept for her. Lucas, only 4 then, was in my arms, confused, his innocent eyes roaming, not understanding. "Grandma, where's my mommy?" he asked in his tiny voice. I held him tightly, swallowed my tears, and whispered, "Your mommy is in a very beautiful place, my love." Inside, I was ruined. Daniel collapsed before the casket. His shoulders shook. He couldn't speak. He tried to be strong, but his gaze was empty, as if part of his soul had gone with Emily. After that, Daniel changed. He threw himself into work, leaving before dawn and returning after Lucas was asleep. He was running from the immeasurable void in his heart. But Lucas, my poor boy, suffered the most. He spoke less. His eyes were often sad, as if waiting for a miracle to bring his mother back. I became his only anchor, taking him to daycare each morning and sitting by his bed each night to tell him a story. "Grandma, tell me a story about my mommy," he'd ask, and with a tight voice I would, how Emily sang to him, how she cut fruit into tiny pieces for his favorite dessert. Each story was a way to keep Emily alive in Lucas's mind and in my heart. Lisa, my adopted daughter, became a vital part of those days too. Warm-hearted and skillful, she often came by with coloring books or cookies she'd baked herself. Lisa loved Lucas as if he were her own little brother. She carried him, taught him to read, or sat for hours, helping him with clumsy drawings. "Look, Lucas, your house looks so much nicer than mine," she'd say, laughing like tiny bells. Sometimes I caught Lisa watching Daniel when he came home, silent after long days. It was a deep look, more than a sister's affection. I saw it and chose not to speak. Perhaps I feared upsetting the fragile balance we had left. I remember the afternoon Daniel first brought Elena to meet me. I tried to open my heart, to see her as a mother who wants her son to find happiness after so much pain. Deep down, though, a chill of unease wouldn't leave me. That evening, Daniel arrived later than usual. I was in the kitchen making cheese spätzle, Lucas's favorite, when the door opened. Daniel came in with a strange brightness on his face, the same shine he'd had in his youth when he spoke about Emily, with a passion he couldn't hide. "Mom," he said hesitantly from the doorway, "I want you to meet someone." I put down what I was doing and looked at him, a little nervous. "Someone special?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "Yes, you'll like her," he said confidently. I nodded, wiping my hands on my apron to hide the worry growing inside me. After Emily, I wasn't sure anyone could fill the void, not for Daniel, not for Lucas, not for me. That night, Elena arrived. She came in wearing a light blue dress, hair in soft waves framing her face, lips a gentle red curved into a smile, charming, almost rehearsed to please. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. "Hannah," she said sweetly, bowing her head a little. I smiled back, invited her in, and served a fragrant cup of hot chocolate. "What a cozy home," Elena said, as her eyes moved along the family photos on the wall, pausing at one of Emily hugging little Lucas. I nodded thanks, but her gaze lingered longer than I liked, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Dinner went as warmly as I could make it. I set out everything I'd cooked that afternoon: Maultaschen, a dish like sausage goulash, and a fresh salad with apples, Lucas's favorite. Daniel sat beside Elena and couldn't take his eyes off her. Happiness showed in all he did. "Mom, Elena works in marketing at my company. She's really good," he said with pride. Elena smiled, served me a portion with delicate, calculated movements. "Mrs. Hannah, it's delicious. You must teach me," she said with a friendly glance. I smiled politely, but a small part of me stayed uneasy. There was something in the way she spoke and laughed that felt like a well-rehearsed play. Lucas sat at the head of the table, unusually quiet. He, who normally chattered non-stop about school, just pushed food around without looking up. I noticed he avoided Elena's gaze, as if trying to hide in a safe corner. Elena leaned forward, took a chocolate bar from her purse, and set it before Lucas. "This is for you." "It's very good, Lucas," she said, voice sweet as if she could win him over. Lucas froze. His small hands gripped his utensils, then he turned his head away and didn't touch the chocolate. I saw a flash of fear in his eyes, and my heart clenched. Daniel frowned, ready to scold his son. "Lucas, what's with you? Elena is offering you a treat." I stepped in. "It's nothing. He's just tired. Let him be." Daniel sighed, said no more, and turned to pour Elena more wine, as if to smooth things over. Lisa was at dinner too, sitting across from me. I saw her expression darken when Elena took Daniel's hand under the table. Lisa has always been sensitive. I know she loves Daniel like a brother, but sometimes I wonder if it goes deeper. When Elena took his hand, Lisa's hand paused over her glass. Her fingers tightened. She said nothing, only lowered her head and kept eating, but her silence weighed more than words. After dinner, Elena insisted on washing the dishes, though I refused several times. "Mrs. Hannah, you rest," she chirped. I reluctantly agreed and watched her roll up her sleeves, humming as she cleaned. I admit, she did it perfectly. Dishes stacked neatly. The sink gleamed. For a moment I thought, she seems very attentive. But then I walked into the living room. Lucas was coloring, his little hands clutching a crayon. Elena sat beside him and praised him. "You draw so well, Lucas. What's that? Show me." Lucas instantly dropped the crayon and leaned back with distrust, as if she were a threat. Elena glanced at me, then forced a quick smile to gloss over the awkwardness. "What a shy boy," she said in that same sweet voice. But in her eyes, I saw something odd flash. Daniel, meanwhile, noticed nothing. He poured more wine, told funny work stories, and laughed loudly when Elena joked. The evening ended with my son entirely satisfied, saying goodbye to Elena at the door, eyes fixed on her as if no one else existed. I watched them leave, that strange feeling in my chest, that something wasn't right. Time passed and Elena slowly became part of our lives. One weekend, bright Portland sun streaming into the living room, I was knitting a scarf when Elena appeared with a broad smile. "Mrs. Hannah, I'd like to take Lucas to the playground today. Is that okay?" she asked brightly. I looked at Lucas, still and quiet on the floor with his wooden blocks. "Of course, he'll love it," I said, forcing a smile while a little worry stirred inside me. Daniel was at work, and I thought fresh air might be good for Lucas. Elena took his hand and led him to the door while I watched them go, heart heavy with an odd weight. When they returned, Elena came in triumphant. "He had so much fun, went down the slide nonstop and even asked for ice cream," she said cheerfully. But when I looked at Lucas, I saw dry dirt smudges on the blue shirt I'd ironed that morning. He was quiet, holding his toy car, and said nothing about the outing. "Did you have fun, sweetheart?" I asked, bending to stroke his hair. He only nodded slightly, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to ask more, but Elena cut in with her ever-sweet voice. "I told you, he loved it." I nodded, but inside another small puzzle piece clicked into the growing doubt. Another time, with Daniel at work, Elena dropped by unannounced. I was in the kitchen making cabbage rolls for lunch when I heard her talking to Lucas. At first gentle, her voice suddenly turned harsh. "Be quiet, Lucas. Don't make a mess. You're big now and still act like a baby." I froze mid-chop, a chill running through me. I stepped into the room and Elena immediately changed her tone, sweet as sugar. "Our Lucas is so smart. Look at the tall tower he built." She pointed, smiling at his wooden blocks. Lucas pressed his lips together and looked at me as if asking for help. I forced a smile. "Yes, he's very skilled." Inside, a thorn of unease kept digging in. I calmed myself. Maybe she just wasn't used to children. Lucas's 7th birthday is a memory I'll never forget. Lisa spent all morning baking a chocolate cake, Lucas's favorite. When she set the cake down with the candles lit, Lucas squealed with joy. His eyes sparkled for the first time in months. "Aunt Lisa, this is my favorite cake," he shouted and ran to hug her. She stroked his hair, I made it for you, sweetheart. Eat plenty. Warmth spread through me, like our family's flame flickering back to life. Elena was there, too, but only clapped awkwardly from a corner with a lifeless smile. Her only gift was a bland pat on Lucas's shoulder and a half-hearted, "Happy birthday, champ." I saw Lucas shrink a little, avoiding her eyes, and my heart hurt. I wanted to say something, but kept quiet. Another day, Daniel, Elena, and Lucas went to the grocery store. When they came back, I heard Elena complain irritably, "Lucas spilled a whole bag of candy at checkout, and I had to pay for it. What a clumsy kid." Daniel frowned and turned to scold his son. "Lucas, you're big now. You must be more careful." Lucas lowered his head, little hands clasped, eyes seeking mine for help. I stepped in and put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, honey. It was just candy." Inside, though, I couldn't stop wondering why Elena lost patience so easily with a child, why she couldn't be gentler, like Emily had been. And so, my son's wedding day arrived. That afternoon, Portland's golden sun poured through tall windows, bathing the hall in a radiant light as if to bless my boy's happiness. I sat at table 8 with Lucas and my adopted daughter, Lisa. Lucas played with his little red car, murmuring a soft vroom vroom. I looked at him with tenderness. Lisa, in a simple beige dress, sat on the other side, occasionally leaning toward Lucas to whisper in his ear with a smile as sweet as morning sun. "Sweetheart, have another piece of bread," she said, breaking him a bit. I smiled, watching them, and felt comforted. Though we'd suffered so much, Lisa and Lucas were the fire that warmed my soul. Daniel, in a navy suit, moved among the tables, toasting relatives. His face shone with happiness. His bright smile seemed to erase the dark years after Emily's death. I looked at him with pride and sadness, hoping he'd found new joy, that Elena, radiant in her glittering gown, would offer him a new home. But whenever my eyes met Elena's, laughing for the cameras with her wineglass never leaving her hand, a thorn pricked my heart. Her smile felt too perfect, like a carefully placed mask. The band's soft melody mingled with lively chatter. Servers moved discreetly with appetizers, crisp potato chips, fragrant lentil soup, and elegantly plated fish courses. I noticed Lucas took only one potato chip and gently pushed the fish plate aside. I frowned. "Don't you like it, love?" He shook his head and looked away, as if hiding something. Before I could ask more, a close relative interrupted cheerfully. "And Lucas is behaving so well. Hannah, look how big he is." I smiled. "He's a little gentleman, so smart." But inside I worried. Lucas had never refused food in such a strange way. From a distance, I saw Elena's gaze settle on our table. For a second, the smile on her lips hardened, just enough to notice, before she turned back to toast another guest. I told myself I was overthinking. Then everything changed at once. Lucas, still playing with his toy car, pushed it too hard and it rolled to the floor. He bent to pick it up, but froze, eyes wide, fixed on something under the table. I leaned in to ask what it was when, with trembling hands and a pale face, Lucas pulled out a folded paper. He clamped onto my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandma, please, let's go. Now." My heart thumped so hard it might burst. "What is it, honey?" I tried to stay calm, but his panic-stricken eyes wouldn't let me. Trembling, he repeated the question that turned my blood cold. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" Those words paralyzed me. I lifted the cloth. In the dark space lay that harmless-looking, terrible paper. I took it with shaking hands. The world shrank to me, Lucas, and that slip. I unfolded it. Candlelight was enough to read. Table 8, add kids' shrimp portion. A jolt shot through my whole body. I crushed the paper in my fist. Music, laughter, everything around me plunged into a void. Elena, radiant in her bridal gown, was still laughing in a corner, raising her glass as if nothing could touch her. Daniel was busy taking photos with coworkers, smiling as if this were the happiest day of his life. But for me, it was all a facade hiding the terrible truth I had just found. I clenched the paper so hard it burned my skin. Lucas, whom I loved more than my own life, had nearly been the victim of a wicked plan on his father's wedding day. I turned to Lisa, seated beside Lucas. Her eyes filled with worry when she saw my face. "Please watch Lucas," I said, trying to sound calm though my voice shook. Lisa nodded, pulled Lucas close, and held him tight, like a shield. "Where are you going?" she asked softly, afraid. I only shook my head. I didn't know what I would do. I hurried to the corridor. My legs were heavy as lead, my heart hammering me forward. Near the bar, a group of servers were chatting, their laughter clashing with the storm inside me. I recognized Mark, the young man who had brought our food several times. Friendly face, kind smile. But I had no room for that thought. I walked straight to him, pressed the paper into his hand, and asked firmly, "Do you know who sent this?" Mark looked at it, and his face changed at once. His easy smile vanished. Panic replaced it. "Oh my God, that's mine," he stammered, hands shaking, as if wanting to snatch it back. "A young woman gave it to me. It must have fallen from my tray." His words cut through the confusion like a beam of light and fueled my fury. "Who gave it to you?" I insisted, nearly shouting, having lost all restraint. Mark stepped back, flustered. "I don't know her name, Mrs. Hannah. She just told me to take it to the chef. There was no sender on the slip." Rage flared hot. I stepped forward, my voice trembling with anger and fear. "Do you know my grandson is severely allergic to shrimp? One bite could kill him." Mark went pale, eyes wide with horror. He shook his head furiously. "Mrs. Hannah, I truly didn't know. I just followed the instruction. I had no idea." His voice broke, as if he, too, were trapped in the nightmare. Other servers whispered, watching with worry. I clenched the paper. It seemed to burn my palm. I wanted to scream, to smash everything, but I knew I couldn't give in. For Lucas, for my family. From the hall, the MC's cheerful voice announced the main course. Cruel reminder that time was moving. If I hesitated, a deadly trap might be waiting for Lucas. I took a deep breath, fighting the tremor in my body. Silence would never do. If I didn't act now, I'd never forgive myself. I returned to the hall, the paper in my hand, proof of a sinister plan. The room still glowed with candlelight, music blended with laughter, servers moved with main courses, the air filled with roast meat and fragrant sauce. But to me, it was all a sham. I looked at Lucas, curled into Lisa, eyes wide with fear searching for me, his safe harbor in the storm. I took his tiny hand and, as if moved by an invisible force, stood abruptly. My voice rang clear over the music and chatter. "One moment, please. Before we eat, I need to clarify something." The room fell silent, as if time stopped. Every eye turned to table 8, where I stood with Lucas at my side and Lisa seated, a spark of resolve in her eyes. Glasses stilled, murmurs died. Only my heartbeat filled my ears. I raised the paper. The scrawled words were an undeniable accusation. "Who wrote this, demanding shrimp be added to the child's meal at table 8? I asked, my voice shaking with outrage but sharp. Ripples of whispers spread like waves on a calm lake. Some guests looked at each other, puzzled. I felt Lucas's gaze on me, pleading for protection. Daniel hurried over, a smile dying on his face as he saw mine. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, confused. I didn't answer right away. I set the paper on the table and slid it toward him. "Read it," I said, voice hard, though my insides were chaos. He read, and I watched his face drain, his hands tremble. "What does this mean?" he asked, stunned, looking from me to Lucas, searching for sense. Elena, stunning in her gown, approached with a perfectly staged frown. "What is this?" "A bad joke," she said quietly, but I caught a flash of panic in her eyes. I met her eyes, my heart full of anger and fear. "My grandson is allergic to shrimp," I said, my voice trembling with indignation. "This is not a joke. This is attempted murder." My words struck like thunder. The hall fell into a tomb quiet. Some guests gaped, others whispered, eyes flicked between me and Elena. Elena let out a forced laugh, a mask to stay composed. "Sorry, Mrs. Hannah, but there's no name on that note. Are you really going to believe a story a child made up because he found a slip of paper?" she said, mocking, trying to make me look paranoid. Doubt stirred among some guests. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Who would do such a thing at a wedding? Boiling, I nearly lost my voice. I wanted to rip that bridal mask off and expose the truth, but I had to stay calm. For Lucas. Suddenly Lisa stood and hugged Lucas tight. Her reddened eyes fixed on Elena. "Stop! Elena!" Her voice was cold and aching. She couldn't hold back. Elena stepped forward and slapped her, echoing across the hall. The sharp crack shattered the illusion. Everyone froze, me included. Lisa raised a hand to her cheek, eyes wide with shock, then turned to Daniel, sobbing. "See? She's insane with jealousy. That's why she attacks me. What did I do to deserve this?" Lisa didn't back down. Her fists were clenched, her voice breaking with anger. "You're the only cruel one here. You tried to harm a child at your own wedding." Her words sliced the heavy air. Doubtful eyes swung toward Elena. I saw her freeze. The fake smile vanished. Daniel stood rigid, gaze bouncing between me, Lisa, and Elena, caught between two worlds. "Elena, calm down," he said, voice shaking, but I knew he no longer knew whom to believe. Murmurs swelled like a wave, focusing on me, Elena, and Lucas, trembling in Lisa's arms. Elena tried to keep her false calm, but I saw her hands shake. "This is slander. Someone planted that to ruin our wedding," she snapped. Panic flickered in her eyes. Her mask cracked. I couldn't stand it any longer. Rage exploded in me like fire-consuming patience. I slammed my fist on the table. Glasses rattled. "Enough!" I said in a voice so cold even the music stopped. "Mark, come here." The young server stepped out, face pale with fear, eyes darting. I showed him the paper, my voice shaking but firm. "Confirm. Is this what you received?" Mark nodded repeatedly, stammering. "Yes, Mrs. Hannah. That's it. A young woman at another table gave it to me and it must have slipped off my tray." He lowered his head to avoid my eyes. I felt my blood boil but forced myself to stay composed. Everyone was watching. Elena cut in sharply, almost desperate. "He's mistaken. I know nothing about this." Before I could answer, a weak, pained voice sounded behind us. Elena's sister, Gloria, burst into tears and stood up. "It wasn't my sister Elena who gave me this note," the young girl said, trembling, tears streaming. "She asked me to hand it to the server. I swear I didn't know what was written." A shocked murmur rippled through the hall. "Oh my God, I can't believe it. How could this be?" I looked at Gloria. My heart softened. She was only 16. Her eyes were red and confused, as if she too were trapped in this nightmare. Elena whipped around and yelled at her sister, face twisted with rage. "Shut up, Gloria! You dare invent lies to hurt your own sister?" Her voice was sharp, but her lips trembled, as if fighting to hide the truth. Gloria recoiled, shaking head to toe, and sobbed, "I'm not lying, sister. I only did what you asked." Her words pierced Elena's false armor and stunned the hall. An elderly relative nearby shook his head, voice failing. How could she? Not even spare an innocent child. Amid the chaos, Lisa stepped forward, held Lucas tighter, and said icily, "If you keep denying it, we can check the venue's security cameras. Everything will be clear in minutes." Her words dropped like a stone into a lake. Waves of panic spread. Elena's face went gray, her lips pressed thin, her eyes searched for an escape. There was none. She said nothing more. And that silence, to me, was the clearest confession. Daniel stood paralyzed, his hand trembling on Lucas's shoulder as he stared in horror at the woman he'd just called his wife. His gaze moved from the paper to Lucas and said it all. I watched his heart break, as mine had when the plan was revealed. An uncle rose and shook his head in disgust. Unbelievable. Such malice on a day of celebration. His voice trembled with contained indignation. After Lisa's challenge about the cameras, a deadly quiet spread. Elena, whom I once tried to accept into our family, stood pale-faced, lips tight, groping for one last excuse. But the truth was out. There was nowhere to hide. Daniel stepped toward her, tense face, red eyes. "Elena, tell me the truth. Is it true?" His voice shook, begging for a spark of hope that this was all a mistake. But I knew he felt the same painful truth already. Elena stepped back, forcing a warped smile. Panic flashed in her eyes. "You don't believe me," she said, voice breaking, clinging to the last scrap of Daniel's trust. "This is their plan. I did nothing." Her words sounded weak, like wind dying against an oncoming storm. I looked at her with a heart heavy with indignation and hurt. This woman I thought might bring my son happiness now stood revealed as a stranger, danger I hadn't seen. Lisa placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, controlling herself as best she could. Lucas almost died because of this woman. Her words were razor sharp. Elena screamed, desperate, "Shut up. You're just a jealous intruder." Lisa didn't move. She trembled with anger but stood firm, shielding Lucas. "You dare call me jealous?" Lisa answered, ice cold. "Look into this child's eyes and tell me you didn't try to hurt him." Lucas clung to me. His tiny hand squeezed mine as if afraid he'd be dragged back into the nightmare. Guests began to stand. The festive mood was destroyed. A family friend, Mr. Klein, slammed his hand on the table. "This is a disgrace. We can't just accept it." Agreement murmured like rising waves, sinking Elena beneath the weight of contempt. Caught between truth and love, Daniel cried out, voice breaking with pain and outrage. "Lucas is my son. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words stabbed straight into Elena. She crumpled in tears. But I knew those tears weren't remorse, only the grief of being unmasked. I set the paper on the table and declared, voice firm, "Anyone who tries to harm my grandson will never set foot in this family again." My words echoed, clear and unyielding, like a sentence passed. Elena looked up, eyes blazing, but defeat lay in them. She had not only lost to me, but to the truth. Hotel security arrived and politely, firmly, asked Elena to leave. "Ma'am, please come with us," one said coldly. Elena backed away, seeking help with her eyes, but no one stood with her. Many shook their heads, set their glasses down half full, and sighed. "Unbelievable," someone whispered. "How can anyone be so cruel?" said another, horrified. Daniel stood still, hands on his head as if trying to stop his world from falling apart. Then, as if he had no strength left, he knelt slowly before Lucas and said, voice choked, "Son, forgive me, my love, for not protecting you." Tears streamed down his cheeks. My heart split in two. I helped Daniel up, gripped his shoulders, and said, steady and serious, "Thank God we stopped it in time. This false happiness ends here and now." I looked at Elena, escorted out under a hail of contempt, and knew in my heart she had never been part of this family, nor would she ever be, In the days after that disastrous wedding, our family spun in a quiet whirlwind, wounds still bleeding, questions lingering. I felt as if I'd just awakened from a nightmare in which I almost lost Lucas, my grandson, whom I love more than life. The story of the ruined wedding spread everywhere, from suburban streets to distant relatives' calls. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some blamed Daniel for trusting Elena blindly. Others pitied Lucas, the innocent child nearly caught in a wicked plan. Daniel withdrew. He was no longer the radiant man in the navy suit. He picked Lucas up from school every day in silence. His eyes were full of pain and guilt. Elena's name, like a curse, was never spoken at home again. I watched Daniel with an aching heart, but knew he needed time to heal, to find himself after being betrayed by someone he loved. I didn't blame him. Love can blind people. But I also knew our family had to rise from the ashes. I kept caring for Lucas, as I had since Emily died, cooking his favorites like cabbage rolls and soft pudding to restore his sense of safety. But the one who truly healed Lucas's soul wasn't me. It was Lisa. Every morning she packed his lunch with care, choosing foods free of shrimp or anything that could endanger him. She even wrote a note to his teacher about the allergy with a smiling face drawn in crayon. He loved it. "Aunt Lisa, you draw so well," Lucas cried when he opened his lunch, eyes lighting up as if a piece of his innocence had returned. Each afternoon, Lisa took Lucas to the nearby playground. I often watched from a distance as she taught him to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it would climb high. Once Lucas fell off the slide, Lisa ran to him, lifted him up, brushed off his clothes, and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here." Lucas's bright laugh rang out again, a sound I thought we'd lost forever, now balm to my heart. I looked at Lisa with infinite gratitude. She wasn't only a sister to him, but a second mother filling the space Emily had left. One night, when Lucas had a high fever, I saw Lisa spend the whole night by his side. She sat in a chair beside the bed, laid cool cloths on his forehead, and told him softly the story of a brave sparrow flying through a storm. I stood at the doorway, silent, and noticed Daniel's gaze resting long on Lisa, a complicated look full of gratitude and regret, as if something long ignored was becoming clear. I said nothing, simply withdrew quietly to give them space. In my heart, hope stirred. Maybe there was a light at the end of our dark tunnel. At one of our rare family dinners, with warm lentil soup on the table, Lucas suddenly looked up, his clear eyes fixed on Lisa. "I want Aunt Lisa to be my mom," he said softly but firmly, as if he'd thought about it for a long time. Silence fell. Lisa flushed and lowered her head, gripping her spoon as if to hide her embarrassment. Daniel froze, eyes misting as if Lucas's words had touched something very deep. I smiled, set a hand on Daniel's shoulder, and said warmly, "Real happiness, my son, doesn't come from a dazzling wedding dress, but from a sincere heart that knows how to love." Daniel looked at me, then at Lisa, and I saw a small spark of hope in his eyes. Time passed, and Elena vanished from our lives like a poisonous wind that had blown through. Lucas became a cheerful child again, always clinging to Lisa, his red toy car in hand, and the drawings he made for her. I watched him run and play in the yard and felt great relief, but also a pang for all he'd endured. One day, Daniel took Lisa's hand. He stood suddenly before me in the living room and said, voice trembling yet firm, "Mom, I know I made a mistake. I was blind. I put Lucas in danger. But this time I won't let go of the person who truly stood by our family." Lisa lowered her head, cheeks flushed, but I saw a radiant smile on her lips. I nodded as tears slid quietly down my face. "Son, all I want is for you and Lucas to be happy," I said, voice tight. That night, after Lucas fell asleep, I sat by the window and watched the silver moon over the quiet street. Its gentle light reminded me that although our family had passed through dark days, light always finds a way in. I whispered to myself, family isn't always blood. Sometimes you choose it with love and courage. After that bleak wedding, a truly bright new chapter began for us. I looked at the yard where the kite Lisa and Lucas had flown still hung, and I knew that even if the old wounds never fully healed, we would move forward together, love and strength our support. After everything, I understood something vital. In life, there are losses you can't replace and betrayals that break your heart. But honest love is always the light that keeps the path. Family isn't built only by blood, but by choices, by the courage to protect one another from darkness and danger. It's the willingness to sacrifice and the truth of affection that bring lasting happiness, not false facades. I want everyone to remember to listen, to let the heart lead, because sometimes a small act of attention can save a life. And kindness is what carries us out of nights that seem to have no end.